Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Grandstand Sports Data. In today's video, we're giving you the 2025 NFL season predictions, and this is going to be based on our statistical model that we've shown you almost every single year when it comes to the NFL. We basically what we did was we updated the teams, we put in their free agents, we put in their player values, and then we also added in some of the fundamental factors as we went along and went through the schedule. So you might see a little bit of some crazy results, but this is what the model is going to project for the 2025 season. We're going to show you all the betting numbers and all the bets that it's going to tell you to place. So let's get right into it. And before we dive into this year's predictions, we're going to take a quick look back at how our model has performed over the last two seasons. And in 2023, as you can see, we finished in the green about 9.5 units of profit, with that biggest win coming at the Super Bowl when we hit the Kansas City Chiefs at basically a plus 600. That's exactly the kind of long range prediction that this model was basically built for. Now, in 2024, we went the other way, right? We gave a lot back, finishing down just over 22 units. Now, the main drag came from betting every market on the board, basically in both of these, right? Back in 2023, we did every play on the board, and same thing with 2024. But that is the thing. That's the key lesson here. This is really illustrating why finding your edge and picking your spots is so important, and that playing every number on the board like this model does isn't the most efficient way to bet long term. It's about zeroing in on those situations where you have the clearest edge and letting the weaker plays go. So, let's get into our 2025 projections, where we sharpen the model and added in some of those fundamental factors that we mentioned, and let's get into it. So let's start with the AFC projections, and here is the AFC projections for the 2025 season. And before we get into the numbers, a quick reminder on how the model works. Every projection assumes full health across the roster, which we know never truly happens, right? Especially over a 17-game season. And the other thing is when two teams face off, the model gives the win to whichever side it favors, even if it's by the smallest of margins. So, example here, Baltimore has a 51% chance of winning over the Buffalo Bills, who have a 49% chance. So that game goes down as a Ravens win in this projection. But obviously, you have to take into effect that that 49% win probability by Buffalo has a chance of happening. You should know this as a sports bettor. So this model is going to go by who was basically favored in those games and who had the bigger win probability. So let's take a look at the conference column, right? Just so you can get adjusted to it. The conference column is just basically going to be the seed across the conference. The teams shaded in green are going to mean that they made the postseason, while the ones in red are left out. So let's start with the AFC North, and I know it's a little bit out of order, but that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with the boldest call here, which is Baltimore Ravens at 17-0, locking down the number one overall seed. And please remember, this is only telling you Baltimore is favored in our model for all of their football games. It's not telling you they're going to win them all, that they're favored in them according to our model. Now, behind them is the Steelers, landing at about 12-5, good for the 7th seed, while Cincinnati is 10-7, and that mark is going to leave them just short in that 8th spot. Now, Cleveland, they're projected to completely collapse, basically, finishing 1-16, so that's good enough for 15th in the conference. Let's bounce over to the East, which is right to the right of that. And Buffalo's going to check in at 15-2, grabbing the number 2 seed. New England's going to fight to a respectable 10-7 season, but only reach the 9 spot, which leaves them outside the playoff picture. Miami and the Jets both stumble with double-digit losses, sitting 11th and 14th for the conference. We're going to jump over to the West, which is up in the top left. Denver, they're stunning the model here, projected at 15-2 and slotted into the 3 seed. Both Kansas City and the Chargers finish at 13-4, with the Chiefs taking the 5 and the Chargers taking the 6 seed. Now, this means that there's 3 playoff teams from the AFC West, while Las Vegas is going to lag behind at 4-13 for the 13th overall seed in the AFC. We're going to finish it off with the South, where Houston's division, it's basically Houston's division to lose, basically, right? They're coming in, grabbing that 11-6. That's going to give them the 4 seed in a home playoff game. The Colts, though, they will hover at 9-8 and that 10th seed, while Jacksonville and Tennessee round out the bottom of the conference at 12th and 16th, respectively. So the playoff picture in the AFC looks a lot like Baltimore, Buffalo, Denver, Houston, claiming the top 4 seeds and winning their divisions, while KC, the Chargers, and Pittsburgh will round it out with the wild card. So Cincinnati, New England, and Indy, they are among the notable misses here. And again, just want to remind you, these numbers are projections. They're not predictions of certainty. But they do show how our model views the conference heading into 2025. The Ravens are basically a juggernaut, and Buffalo and Denver pushing close behind, and some surprising shifts in power across the AFC. Now, let's jump over to the NFC projections for 2025. And just like in the AFC, you need to remember the context here. So these projections aren't guarantees. They're the model's best read on how the season shakes out. So let's start with the NFC East, where the Eagles come out on top in a dominant fashion at 16-1, earning the number one seed in the conference. Washington surprises with an 11-6 record, landing in the 6th seed, while Dallas and New York both bottom out, with the Giants projected to tie for the worst record in football at 1-16. So let's jump over to the north. It's Detroit's time, and it's been Detroit's time, right? Now the Lions are projected to go 14-3, locking down the 3 seed and continuing their climb as one of the NFL's elite. Green Bay manages a winning record at 9-8, but that's only enough for the 7th seed. Minnesota and Chicago both fall back into the middle of the pack, and over in the West, the 49ers remain as powerful as ever, finishing 16-1. I think that's going to be based on their strength of schedule, and they're going to be grabbing that 2 seed right behind Philadelphia. Now, just because we just saw that San Francisco 16-1, I'm letting you guys know again, these are just that they're favored in 16 out of the 17 games according to our model, right? They may finish 9-8. I'm just saying that they're favored according to our model 16 out of the 17 games. That, from basically what I just saw, is based on straight the schedule. But let's move on to the remaining of the division. You could see the Rams also put together a strong season at 12-5, earning the 5 seed, while Arizona comes in at 8-9, just outside of the playoff bubble, while Seattle slips at 3-14. Not too bad there out in the West. And in the South, Tampa Bay leads the way at 11-6, good for a 4 seed in a home playoff game. Atlanta's going to hang around at 7-10, but the model shows complete collapse for Carolina and New Orleans, both projected at 1-16, tied for the bottom of the conference. So your projected NFC playoff picture looks like this. Philly, San Fran, Detroit, and Tampa Bay as the division winners, with the Rams, Washington Commanders, and Green Bay rounding out the wild cards. Dallas, Minnesota, and Arizona headline the list of notable misses. And just like the AFC, these records highlight the model's leans, not their certainties. But what stands out here is the balance of top, basically at the top, which is Philly and San Fran both sitting at that 16 wins. Detroit cementing itself as a contender, and Tampa Bay keeping control of a shaky South division. Okay, so now let's shift to more of the future markets and starting with teams that will make the playoffs. And on the slide, you can see that every team in the league, whether our model projects them to qualify, and the odds that go along with that decision. So that means when you see a team like Baltimore or Buffalo marked at yes, at heavy chalk at minus 450 and minus 750, the model loves them. But the betting market already knows it. So you're not going to get much value laying those kinds of prices. On the flip side, let's look at the Steelers. The model has them at 12-5, and that correlates to a playoff berth, but their price sits at plus money at plus 118 to make it. That's where the concept of finding your edge comes into play. If the model shows a high probability of Pittsburgh reaching the postseason, and the market is still giving you plus odds, that's a spot where you might have to find that value. Now, there are also some fades worth noting as well. Cincinnati, despite being a perennial contender, is projected out of the field here. Same story with New England, Minnesota, and the Dallas Cowboys. Now, these are recognizable names with strong fan bases, but the model says the road to the postseason just isn't there in 2025. So, what this board really illustrates is the difference between projections and betting decisions. The model plays every team in every scenario, but as a bettor, you don't need to. It's about identifying those mismatches between the model and the market, spots where you're getting paid better than you should for an outcome with a strong probability. And in this set, teams like Pittsburgh, Green Bay, and Denver stand out as possible value plays depending on the price that you're able to grab them at. All right, so now let's take a look at some of the win totals, another popular futures market every offseason. And on this slide, you'll see each team, their listed total, and whether the model leans over or under in the current price attached to that bet. So let's start with some of the overs the model really likes. Baltimore is going to come in over 11.5. Buffalo is going to come in at over 12.5, and San Francisco over 10.5. So those lines up with the broader projections we saw earlier are dominant teams that the model believes will rack up regular season wins. But you'll notice the odds are shaded toward the expensive side. For example, San Francisco at over 10.5 is priced at plus 105. That's not bad. But Buffalo over 12.5 is sitting at about minus 125. So you're paying a premium there, and you've almost got no margin forever if they drop a couple of coin flip games. Now, on the flip side, there are unders the model is very comfortable with. Cleveland under 4.5 at plus 120. The Jets at under 6.5 at minus 125. And New Orleans under 4.5 at plus 120. So these are teams the model sees struggling badly, and the odds suggest that the market already leans that way too. So the real value often shows up in the middle of the board. Looking at the Steelers at 8.5 wins, the model has them at basically 12-5. So taking over 8.5, even at minus 120, could be one of the more actionable plays. Same with Green Bay, under 10.5 at minus 125. The model has them sneaking into the playoffs at 9 wins, which lines up perfectly with an under ticket cashing. And that's the lesson with win totals. It's not about playing every number like we've been saying throughout this presentation. It's about finding your spots, finding the number, seeing your edge, and jumping on it right away. Next, let's take a look at the division winners. And on this board, you're going to see the model's projected winners in every division. Okay, and along with the current betting odds for them to come up on top. So we're going to start with the AFC North, and that's the Ravens, the overwhelming favorites according to the model, projected at a near perfect season. The market has them priced at minus 155, which is actually not that steep when you consider how dominant the model views them. Now, in the East, it's Buffalo once again, and the Bills are posted at minus 260 to win the division, which lines up with their 15-2 projection. The problem here is price. You're paying a lot for a market that can swing quickly if Josh Allen or another key piece just misses a lot of time. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. The AFC West. The model has Denver leapfrogging both Kansas City and the Chargers, winning the division at 15-2, and the betting market is offering plus 310 for that outcome. So that's exactly the kind of edge that we're looking for. When the model loves a team and the books are still giving you more than 3-1 on your money, that's huge for us, right? In the AFC South now, let's move on to Houston. They're taking the crown at 11-6 with odds of about plus 115. And this one's really tight. Indy is hovering around that 500 mark. Jacksonville still has the talent to push, but the model leans Houston, and at plus money, it's not a bad look. Let's shift to the NFC now. The Lions sit atop of the North at 14-3 at plus 200, so they're one of the better value plays on the board, especially considering how consistent they've been in the past 2 seasons. So they're a good play. I know some people think that Green Bay might compete with them. I think that is an overreaction to, acquiring Micah Parsons. And I know some people are going to go, "What, are you crazy?" Jordan Love still has to make the steps, and I think that's why the number hasn't really jumped. And if it has jumped for Green Bay to win the division, it's because of the overreaction. I think as the season plays out, that's going to be more of the question for Green Bay than it is of Micah Parsons fitting in. It's going to be, did Jordan Love make the necessary steps to become that better quarterback? Now, let's jump to the NFC East here. Philadelphia continues its dominance. 16-1 projection puts them far ahead of Washington and Dallas, and the price at minus 145 is not necessarily cheap, but it's reasonable for a heavy favorite. Now in the West, it's San Francisco with the 16-1 projection. I think that projection is really, really high. And at plus 175 odds to take the division, you might want to consider that. So considering how wide the gap looks between the Niners and the rest of the West, that's one of the rare plays that still feels like it has some teeth. And then finally, we're going to round it out with Tampa Bay. And they edge out Atlanta in the South at 11-6, priced at about minus 105. So that's essentially a coin flip in the market. And the model has them on top, which could, make this one playable if you believe in Baker and company taking another step forward. So the story here that you're seeing, Ravens, Bills, and Eagles are the safe chalk. But Denver, Detroit, and even Houston offer an intriguing value where the model is much higher on them than the market seems to be. Now let's walk through how the playoffs shake out according to our model. And remember, this is all built on game by game and the higher probability outcome getting advanced. So that doesn't mean upsets can't or won't happen. It just means that this is the path the model sees most often happening. So starting with the AFC, the wild card round, you see Buffalo handles Pittsburgh, while Denver edges out Chargers in a divisional rematch. Houston squeaks by Kansas City in what would be a massive shock, knocking out Mahomes in the first round. And then we'll jump over to the NFC where the 49ers take care of business against Green Bay. Detroit flexes its muscles over Washington. And then you have an upset in the round where the Rams take down Tampa on the road 27-24 to advance. That moves us into the divisional round. So this is where the heavyweights kind of start to separate. Baltimore, fresh off of its near perfect regular season, according to our model, beat Houston. And then Buffalo wins a thriller over Denver, setting up a showdown everyone's been waiting for in the AFC Championship. On the NFC side, the Eagles slip past the Rams, while Detroit knocks off San Francisco, ending the Niners' run one step short of the conference title game. So that's going to bring us on to championship weekend. In the AFC, we have Baltimore and Buffalo finally clashing, and it's the Ravens who are going to prevail 28-23, cementing themselves as one of the conference top dogs. And then the NFC, Detroit outlasts Philadelphia in another tight 124-23, setting up a Ravens-Lions Super Bowl that would be a classic battle of power and resilience. And in the big game, the model crowns Baltimore as your 2025 Super Bowl champions. The Ravens beating the Lions 27-24, completing a storybook season and delivering Lamar Jackson in the kind of championship validation his critics have been waiting on. So, to recap, the Ravens look like the favorite from start to finish. The Lions finally break through to represent the NFC in the championship, and Buffalo and Philly come out just a little bit short. So, if this path plays out, it would be one of the most dramatic and memorable seasons that we've seen in decades. Okay, so this is when we narrow it down. We're looking at our conference winners now, just according to the model. And it's giving us Baltimore Ravens in the AFC and the Detroit Lions in the NFC. And starting with Baltimore, they're projected to be nearly unstoppable, right? The price on them to win the AFC sits at plus 340, which is strong value when you considering how consistently the model favors them in every single matchup. That said, no path through the AFC is ever easy. You got Buffalo, Kansas City, and even a rise in Denver all stand in the way. But the Ravens are built to win on both sides of the ball, and the model reflects that dominance. Now, let's move on to the NFC side, and it's going to be the Detroit Lions at plus 700. That's a long number for a team in the model sees reaching the big stage. It's going to highlight a potential betting edge if you buy into Detroit's upward trajectory. So, the story here is simple. Baltimore has the chalk, Detroit has the value. The Ravens are projected juggernauts, but the Lions might be the team that sneaks up on the market. Both paths collide in the model Super Bowl projection. And as we saw, it's Baltimore who ultimately finishes the job, but we'll touch on their odds to do that. And here it is, the model Super Bowl pick for the 2025 season, the Baltimore Ravens. So basically, from start to finish, the model has Baltimore as the class of the NFL, favorites in every regular season game, wins over Houston and Buffalo in the AFC playoffs, and then a type Super Bowl victory win over the Detroit Lions. So it's all pointing to Lamar Jackson and then John Harbaugh finally hoisting that Lombardi once again for himself. But at 700, the Ravens are basically priced as one of the top favorites as a contender, but not necessarily the favorite when you're looking at all the prices, which we will get into in a different video. What I will say is that I highly disagree with the model. I think that the Kansas City Chiefs are still the team in the AFC. They've I want to say in the last 4 or 5 years they've only not been to the Super Bowl once. I think that still Kansas City is the team to beat. It's not going to be Baltimore. The model really likes Baltimore, and I think if you're staying healthy in a 17 game season and there were no such thing as injuries, maybe Baltimore would be the team to win it all. Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's give you a quick preview of what we'll be covering all season long for our NFL side. First off, we're fighting with ourselves a bit on whether we want to try a new concept this year or a weekly recap show to basically replace our old power rating show. And the idea is to step back each week and recap what happened across the league and cover the betting analysis that we have below on a weekly basis. And when I say below, those bullet points underneath the second bullet point. That way, you get a clear picture of not just the numbers, but how they played out in real time. And then on top of that, we will continue to break down weekly matchups and betting analysis. That means you'll get the technical side, the stats, the model projections, paired with the fundamental side, like injuries, rest, coaching, and situational factors. And we'll also mix in trends and angles. So this is, the whole historical patterns that tend to pop up year after year in the course and the model's actual predictions. We're also going to show you the graphs. That's basically our trends and angles. So whether you're looking for raw data, deeper football context, or just betting takeaways, we'll have it covered. So the goal isn't just to give you picks, but to help you understand why behind them and sharpen your own process week after week. Okay, so here are the fundamental factors we'll be tracking again this season. So none of these are new. We tracked them last year, but the goal is to keep building data for 2025 and to add historical record, right? On the other side, or on one side, you got things like matchups, rest, travel, and recent performance, spots like favorites in a high total, underdogs and low totals, rest differential, and then long travel situations like the 620-mile rule. On the other side, we have divisional dogs, our NFL coaching model that we touched on last year. We made a video about it last year as well. Rivalry games, and then contrarian spots against the market. So the idea isn't that any one factor wins bets on its own. It's about collecting enough history to see which of these, or even some factors together, consistently provide an edge. So we can separate what really matters from what's just noise. So that's going to wrap up our 2025 NFL season predictions. According to the model, the Ravens are projected Super Bowl champions, but as always, it's about finding the edge and picking your spots throughout the year. So if you enjoyed this breakdown and want to follow along all season, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a show. Drop a like if you found the analysis helpful, and share this video with a friend. And whoever's into betting or just loves football talk. And most importantly, let us know what you think in the comments section down below. Who do you have winning it all this year? And do you agree with the model, or do you see someone else making a run? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.